When we think of iconic dinosaur weapons, our minds jump to giant jaws and flesh-tearing claws. Let's be honest, the meat eaters usually get all the attention, which makes it all the more surprising that most evil weapons evolution ever gave dinosaurs belonged to herbivores. Starting off with a heavy, slow-moving plant eater, these are the infamous horns of the Ceratopsians, a set of brutal spikes mounted to a dinosaur's face. One of the few prehistoric weapons that belonged to a herbivore that we know for a fact was used to kill. And the most famous of them all, the Triceratops. Triceratops is one of the most recognizable dinosaurs of all time. It's the iconic three-horned tank featured in films, museum halls, and countless illustrations, often facing off against T-Rex. This rivalry isn't just mainstream media fiction. Fossil evidence shows us that these two giants had legit beef with each other for millions of years. Several Triceratops fossils show healed bite marks and puncture wounds that match the teeth of T-Rex, providing clear evidence that these two dinosaurs fought and that Triceratops survived on those encounters more than once. But it seems Triceratops was capable of more than just surviving an encounter with a T-Rex. It could actually fight back. The famous dueling dinosaurs fossil may capture this exact moment, a Triceratops and a T-Rex locked in battle, potentially killing each other. We also have a very large fossil record of Triceratops. In fact, it's one of the most frequently discovered dinosaurs, with over 47 skulls unearthed between 2000 and 2010 alone. Because of that, we've been able to create highly accurate reconstructions and reliable size estimates for this iconic animal. We know it likely measured 8 to 9 meters long and could weigh up to 10 tons, which puts it as one of the heaviest non-sauropod dinosaurs of all time. But here's the thing, even though Triceratops is the poster child for horned dinosaurs, it might not have been the biggest. In the same region and time period, Torvosaurus appeared, carrying an even longer frill and possibly growing heavier. Further north, a massive skull was found in Canada and gave rise to Eotriceratops. Based on its dimensions, it may have pushed the upper limits even higher, potentially being the biggest Ceratopsian ever discovered. But the truth is, we don't have full skeletons of any of them. Unlike Triceratops, their fossils are incomplete. The size, the weight, is all based on fragments, enough to suggest something huge, but not enough to prove it. But what we do know is this, Triceratops is the most understood of them all, and we're not guessing when it comes to its horns. The fossil record makes it clear, Triceratops used them. Over the years, paleontologists have found dozens of Triceratops skulls and frills, with damage, puncture wounds, lesions and fractures in all the right places, or the wrong places, depending on what side of the horn you were on. One study compared these injuries to those on Centrosaurus, a smaller early Ceratopsian. The difference was striking. Triceratops showed far more facial trauma, especially near the lower horns, and this pattern holds up across the entire Ceratopsian family. None show battle scars like Triceratops does. This suggests they weren't just waving their horns around to look scary, they were smashing them into each other, over and over again. Some skulls even showed healed wounds, meaning these dinosaurs survived the fights and likely walked away victorious. Other fossils have deep gouges in the frill itself, shaped almost exactly like a Triceratops horn. One of the clearest examples of this comes from a specimen known as Big John, one of the most complete Triceratops skeletons ever discovered. This fully grown individual shows multiple injuries across the skull and frill, one wound in particular standing out, a puncture driven clean through the frill, matching the size and shape of a Triceratops horn. It's direct evidence of a violent clash, and proof that these battles left marks not just on the fossil record, but on the animals themselves. It mirrors behaviour we see in animals today like bighorn sheep, goats and antelope, species that battle over territory or mates using similar horn-to-horn tactics. But here's the difference. Modern rams collide at speeds of 20 to 30 kilometers an hour, and they weigh around 70 kilograms. Now imagine that collision between two Triceratops, each dinosaur weighing 150 times more than the rams, with their massive horns leading the charge. Absolutely brutal. But how strong were these horns, and how much damage could they actually do? With CT scans and biomechanical studies, scientists are beginning to answer these questions. First off, these were not hollow or fragile horns like antlers on some deer. Each brow horn could reach at over a meter in length, curving forward like twin spears, and the base of each horn fused deep into the skull, anchored by some of the thickest cranial bone of any land animal we have ever seen. The skull itself was an absolute monster as well, thick bone reaching up to 2.5 meters long. Triceratops didn't have a head, it had a battering ram. And that big frill, it wasn't just for display. Studies on bones show that the frill of a Triceratops was heavily reinforced, meaning it likely served as a shock absorber, taking the brunt of horn impacts and spreading out the force. Even the frill edges show signs of healed damage and bone remodeling, meaning these impacts were happening regularly. These dinosaurs didn't just fight once, they fought over and over again. Researchers have even used finite element analysis, a technique used in engineering to simulate how structures handle stress, to test just how strong Triceratops skulls were. It turns out the skull was built to absorb forces of downward-facing collisions, like two rivals charging head-on. It's the prehistoric equivalent of crash testing a helmet, and Triceratops was passing with flying colours. So while the horns were the star of the show, the real secret weapon may have been the skull behind them, a dense living shield designed to give as much punishment as it could take. Triceratops may have been the most famous horned dinosaur, but it was just one member of a much larger and much weirder family. Ceratopsians came in all shapes and sizes, and their horns, they were anything but copy and pasted. Take Stegosaurus for example. Instead of long brow horns, it had a massive nose horn and a frill lined with spikes projecting outwards, some over half a meter long. It looked like it was wearing a crown of daggers. Then there's Pachyrhinosaurus, a complete curveball. It ditched sharp horns entirely and evolved a massive bony mass on its face, more like a helmet than a spear. No one knows exactly how it used it, but maybe for headbutting rivals, as a battering ram, or maybe even just to intimidate without violence. Many other Ceratopsians all brought their own strange combos of frills and horns to the table. Some long and elegant, some short and thick, some twisted, hooked or flared. It's like nature kept tweaking the blueprint. It's not just for defense, but for display, species recognition, and maybe even communication. In the prehistoric arms race, let's be honest, the meat-eaters usually get all the attention, which makes it all the more remarkable that one of the most effective weapons in dinosaur history didn't belong to a carnivore at all. It actually belonged to a plant-eater, a medium-sized, slow-moving herbivore with a tail that could turn a predator's worst day into their last. This is the Thagomizer, a set of 4 vicious spikes at the end of a dinosaur's tail, one of the few prehistoric weapons that belonged to a herbivore that we know for a fact was used to kill. A group of herbivores evolved not just to warn off predators, but to impale them. And the most famous of them all? The one that turned this tail into an icon? The Stegosaurus. Stegosaurus is one of the most iconic dinosaurs in history, instantly recognisable by the double row of towering plates along its back, and a head that looks comically undersized for its massive body. But beneath that prehistoric armour was something far more dangerous than it looked. And the company it kept? Allosaurus, Torvosaurus, Ceratosaurus. 3 of the most dangerous carnivores of the Jurassic. They weren't the only dinos around, but if you were a Stegosaurus, those were the names that kept you up at night. Stegosaurus had no sharp teeth, no speed, and a brain barely larger than a walnut. Its brain was tiny, like really tiny, so much so that it was often labelled, maybe unfairly, as the dumbest dinosaur of all time. And with that lack of brain power probably came poor eyesight as well. So no, it wasn't going to outrun a predator, and it definitely wasn't going to outthink one, so it needed something else. a brutal four-spiked tail, what scientists now call the Thagomizer. The term Thagomizer started as a joke in a Gary Larson Far Side cartoon, but scientists quickly adopted it to describe the Stegosaurus's tail spikes, typically consisting of 4 long spikes, each one able to reach over 3 feet in length, that's 1 meter. And what makes this weapon even more dangerous was what it was attached to. Its tail. CT scans and analysis of Stegosaurus tail vertebra reveal something surprising. The base of the tail was built for flexibility and power. It had strong muscle attachments and enhanced mobility, allowing it to swing with speed, control, and deadly precision. This wasn't some slow, clumsy swipe. It was a calculated strike, engineered by evolution. And this isn't just theoretical. A fossil of an Allosaurus, a top predator of the time, was found with a puncture wound in its pelvis. The wound was perfectly round, the size and shape matching a Stegosaurus tail spike. The impact was so violent it likely crippled the Allosaurus. The fossil shows signs of large abscesses and infection around the wound, suggesting it lived long enough to suffer, but not long enough to heal. Death would have been slow and painful. And here's the wildest part. This makes the Stegosaurus the only dinosaur we have direct fossil evidence that actually killed a fully grown Allosaurus. Not bad for a dinosaur with the brain smaller than a hot dog. Paleontologist Ken Carpenter reconstructed the mechanics of Stegosaurus's tail and found it could likely swing in an arc of nearly 180 degrees. That meant that it could defend both sides of its body and land a strike to the ribs, legs, or even the face of any predator that got too close. Unlike the blunt force tail clubs of Ankylosaurus, Stegosaurus's tail remained flexible, lacking stiffening structures. This wasn't about smashing, it was about stabbing with precision. So why evolve such a specialized weapon? It was because the Stegosaurus lived in a dangerous neighborhood. The Morrison Formation, where most Stegosaurus fossils are found, was home to some of the deadliest predators of the Jurassic. Ceratosaurus with its blade-like teeth, Torvosaurus, one of the largest carnivores of its time, and Allosaurus, a relentless hunter built for tackling big prey. In a world like that, thick skin wasn't enough. Stegosaurus needed a weapon, and the Thagomizer was just that, but it wasn't the only member of the Stegosauridae family to wield the deadly tail. In fact, some of its relatives evolved even weirder and potentially deadlier versions. One standout is Kentrosaurus, who took things to the next level and developed one of the fastest, most lethal tail swings in dinosaur history. It may have been smaller than the famous Stegosaurus, but its tail was anything but less effective. Where Stegosaurus relied on heavy, powerful swings with its broad Thagomizer, Kentrosaurus evolved a faster, more agile weapon. Its tail spikes were longer, thinner, and sharper relative to its body size, almost like a natural set of spears. Biomechanical studies estimate that Kentrosaurus could swing its tail at speeds ranging from 18 miles per hour to possibly over 40 miles per hour, depending on factors like muscle power, tail flexibility, and body mass. Some of the more sensational claims have suggested speeds as high as 90 miles an hour, but those figures aren't strongly supported by scientific evidence. Whatever the exact number is, scientists and paleontologists agree on one thing. Kentrosaurus had a tail swing that was notably faster than Stegosaurus. Think less sledgehammer, and more whip crack. This difference in tail function likely reflects their size and lifestyle. Stegosaurus, much larger in weight, used its tail power to fend off massive predators. Kentrosaurus, about half the length and less bulky, needed a weapon that matched its more nimble frame. Its tail spikes, long and sharp, probably aimed at vulnerable areas like the legs or abdomen of the attackers, and most likely used their tails for aggression much more often than Stegosaurus. Fossil evidence even backs this up. Many Kentrosaurus tail spikes show clear signs of wear and even healed fractures, proof that they weren't just for show. While Kentrosaurus was perfecting the tail as a high-speed weapon, another member of the Stegosaur family took a very different evolutionary path. This was Merigaya, a dinosaur with such a long neck, you'd be forgiven for thinking it wandered in from the sauropod side of the family tree. Seriously, it looks like a stegosaur doing a sauropod impression. Merigaya longicolum lived around 150 million years ago in what is now Portugal, and its most striking feature is that elongated neck, up to 17 vertebrae long, more than twice as many as any known stegosaur. The big question is, why? Why did this one stegosaur evolve such a dramatically different body plan than its relatives? While Stegosaurus had a short, thick neck built for low browsing, think mid-level ferns and shrubs, Miragaia took a different approach. It was more slender, more lightly built, and overall a bit smaller, measuring around 6 to 7 meters long, or roughly 20 to 23 feet. But what it lacked in bulk, it made up for in one outrageous feature, that neck. But when you picture a stegosaur, you probably imagine a short-necked, low-slung tank of a dinosaur. But Miragaia flipped the script. This bizarre dinosaur mashed together traits that seemed to defy logic. A long neck, tall back plates, and tucked behind all of that, a brutal Thagomizer. Miragaia was a stegosaur-like Stegosaurus, but with a neck that stretched farther than any other known member of its family. This odd anatomy may have helped it browse for food higher up than its relatives, but it also meant one big thing. Its head was further away from its tail. So how did this affect its weapon system? Well, that extra body length meant its tail became even more important. If something came up from behind, Miragaia wasn't turning around to bite or swipe. It just wasn't built like that. But it didn't have to, because waiting at the other end of a long, vulnerable spine was its spiked, flexible whip of a tail. And while the full tail has not been found, stegosaurs from the same region show similar Thagomizer setups. So the odds are Miragaia was packing at least 4 serious spikes, and maybe even more. What makes Miragaia fascinating is the combination of defense and specialization. Its long neck wasn't just a weird evolutionary detour. It created a vulnerability, and nature responded with a countermeasure. A Thagomizer capable of defending a huge rear flank. It's the prehistoric equivalent of putting a security system on the back of a limousine. Miragaia shows us that Thagomizers weren't just copy and pasted across species. They evolved to fit unique needs, even in dinosaurs that weren't built like your typical stegosaur, because this elegant, lanky oddball wasn't just built to reach where others couldn't. It was built to survive where others didn't. The Stegosauridae family was bigger and more varied than most people realise. Besides Stegosaurus, Kentrosaurus and Miragaia, there were others. Now bear with me on the names guys, but we got the Churodroangosaurus, Dacenturus, Hyaiwangusaurus, and the Huerusaurus. Apologies for butchering any of these names. But these stegosaurs weren't just carbon copies of each other. Each species evolved with its own unique twist on the classic stegosaur design. Take the gigant Spinosaurus for example. This dinosaur took spikes to a whole new level. Its massive shoulder spine stuck out sideways like giant razor-sharp shields, unlike the smaller spikes or plates seen in its relatives. These oversized spikes might have been used for defense or display, but whatever their purpose, they make gigant Spinosaurus one of the weirdest and most memorable stegosaurs to ever walk the earth. It just goes to show evolution didn't just settle on one formula for these armored dinosaurs. Instead, it played with plates, spikes, and tails in countless creative ways across the stegosaur family tree. This tail could shatter bone with a single swing. Forget claws and teeth. One of the most powerful weapons in dinosaur history wasn't used to hunt. This is the Ankylosaur tail club, nature's warhammer, a weapon so devastating it could break bones, reshape fights, and send predators running. Today, we're diving into the anatomy, evolution, and raw power behind one of Mother Nature's most brutal inventions, and the most famous of them all, the one that turned this tail into an icon, the Ankylosaurus. Ankylosaurus was never built for speed or stealth. Instead, this dinosaur lumbered slowly through the late Cretaceous in an environment that was dominated by massive apex predators like Tyrannosaurus rex, Albertosaurus, and other giant theropods. Its eyesight was likely average at best, and its brain was hardly impressive. It was a slow herbivore with no camouflage. On paper, Ankylosaurus didn't have much going for it, but still it emerged as one of the most successful and dangerous herbivores ever known. What it lacked in speed and brains, it more than made up for in other unique ways. Ankylosaurus is widely considered to be the most heavily armoured animal of all time, covered head to tail in massive bony plates and sharp spikes. At nearly 8 meters long, weighing around 8 tons, it was basically a living tank. Yet, its armour and size was not the most intimidating part of this animal. Ankylosaurus had evolved a far more direct solution to survival: its tail club. At the end of its heavily armoured body was its tail club, formed from huge osteoderms fused into an oval-shaped knob. In other words, a huge and incredibly dense bit of bone at the end of its tail. To work efficiently, it required a highly specialised anatomy, Unlike flexible whiptails like Diplodocids or the Stegosaurus Thagomizer, Ankylosaurus had a rigid handle built from tightly fused vertebrae and thick ossified tendons. This structure allowed it to swing its club at full force without injuring itself. Paleontologist Victoria Arbour, who has extensively studied Ankylosaur anatomy, explains that without a reinforced structure, a powerful tail swing could tear muscles or dislocate bones. But Ankylosaurus didn't have that problem. Its tail was a perfectly engineered weapon, capable of shattering bone or crippling even the largest predators with a single, well-placed strike. Fossils provide direct evidence of these creatures actually using these weapons in combat and just how effective this tail was. Ankylosaurs like Zuul show healed injuries consistent with tail club strikes, but these were not from predators, but from other ankylosaurs. This suggests that Ankylosaurus didn't only swing its tail to defend against carnivores, but also used in brutal contests of dominance, similar to modern giraffes clashing necks or rams locking horns. And Ankylosaurus didn't evolve this devastating club overnight. It took millions of years. If we rewind the clock nearly 130 million years to what is now Western North America, we find one of the earliest known ankylosaur ancestors, Gastonia. It had a long, flexible tail lined with sharp spikes, useful for fending off smaller predators, though it lacked the sheer force seen in its later relatives. Fast forward to around 90 million years ago, and a crucial change began to take shape. Dinosaurs like Gobisaurus, found in what is now Mongolia and China, evolved stiffer tails reinforced by fused vertebrae and bony tendons. They still didn't have the iconic tail club seen in Ankylosaurus, but the added rigidity turned their tails from flexible whips into solid rods capable of delivering powerful blows even without a club. Fast forward another 15 million years and we see another evolutionary change in the species, when ankylosaurs like Panachosaurus developed heavy, bony knobs at their tail ends. These dense, fused osteoderms formed the first true tail clubs, capable of delivering truly powerful strikes. Interestingly though, not all armoured dinosaurs went this route. Close relatives called Nodosaurids relied instead on spikes and flexible tails, more similar to Stegosaurus Thagomizer rather than a tail club. But perhaps the most unusual version of this weapon came from an armoured dinosaur called Stegosaurus. It evolved a blade-like tail entirely on its own, a sword-like structure completely different from the clubs seen in Ankylosaurus. This strange evolutionary path proves that Ankylosaurus's tail club wasn't some random accident. Similar tail weapons appeared in multiple species at different times all over the world, each with its own unique adaptations. But just how powerful was this club? Modern science has finally begun to answer that question, with 3D scans and digital modelling from the newest found fossils. Large adult ankylosaurs could swing their tail clubs in a wide 100-degree arc. The power came from thick muscles anchored to a stiff handle made of fused vertebrae and hardened tendons. This setup didn't just add stability, it was built for impact. This impact could easily cause significant damage and even break bones of a larger predator. That isn't just guesswork. Studies have actually been done to calculate the potential damage these animals could cause. According to biomechanical studies, the tip of the tail could reach speeds of up to 60 miles per hour, about 100 kilometers per hour. A full-sized club could hit between 7,300 and 14,400 newtons of force. That's more than enough to shatter bone. In fact, it's strong enough to break the legs or joints of large dinosaurs. So we know Ankylosaurus had the capability to do some serious damage, but did they actually use it? The answer is yes, and the proof is fossilized. One of the clearest examples comes from a close relative of Ankylosaurus, Zuul Criovastator, whose name literally means destroyer of shins. Paleontologists discovered a very well-preserved Zuul skeleton, complete with skin impressions and rows of bony armor plates still in place. But what really caught their attention were the hips. Several of the large spike-like structures along Zuul's sides were broken, blunted, and then healed. This tells us two things. One, the injuries were not fatal, and two, they came from something powerful and blunt. The wounds were too precisely placed to be the work of predators. If a T-Rex had taken a bite, we'd see deep punctures and ragged tears. Instead, we see blunt force trauma, exactly where another ankylosaur's tail would have struck in a sideways swing. This strongly suggests that ankylosaurs were using their clubs not just against carnivores, but against each other, likely in combat over territory dominance or mates. This shows these dinosaurs were not just passive tanks trying to survive, but active, social creatures engaged in powerful tail-swinging battles. Earlier we followed how ankylosaurs gradually evolved their iconic tail clubs, but by the late Cretaceous, that journey was complete. The club was no longer an experimental weapon, it was fully formed. What followed wasn't about invention though, it was about variety. Across the Ankylosaur family, evolution began to explore different versions of the same idea. Some species, like Anodontosaurus, developed broad, wedge-shaped clubs with a distinct central prong. Others, like Dilophosaurus, had smaller, narrower clubs, possibly better suited for fast, precise strikes or ritual combat. In Tachia, we see a different approach entirely. A wide, flat club paired with reinforced skull armor, turning the whole body into a weapon. Each tail was shaped by different pressures, from predators, environment, or social behavior. Some were designed to injure, others may have been used just to intimidate. Meanwhile, Nodosaurids took a separate path, dropping the club altogether in favor of spikes and sheer defensive bulk. These weren't primitive stages, they were specialized endpoints, proof that even a single weapon can evolve in multiple directions, each one finely tuned for survival. When you think of weapons in the animal kingdom, teeth, claws, and horns probably come to mind first. But feet, let's be real, they don't exactly sound threatening. They're just for walking, right? Or maybe even running. Well, not always. In the right animal, in the right moment, feet can feel like tools or terrifying weapons. Take a sauropod stomp. Those massive feet could flatten just about anything unlucky enough to be under them. Or look at horses today. One good kick from those legs, it can break bones and send predators running. So yeah, feet can be dangerous, and in some dinosaurs, their feet evolved one of the most brutal weapons evolution ever strapped to a foot. This is the sickle-shaped toe claw of the raptors. This infamous claw wasn't just for show, it was a purpose-built weapon, shaped by millions of years of evolution. Positioned on the second toe of the foot, this sickle-shaped toe claw could reach some pretty insane sizes. But the big question is, what was it actually used for? Unlike brute force weapons like Stegosaur Thagomizer, which crushed or stabbed with sheer power, the raptor's toe claw was far more diverse. It was built for precision, slicing, gripping, and delivering fatal wounds. This claw could puncture soft flesh, tear through thick hide, and do it all with speed and control. But the story doesn't end there. While killing and hunting were its main uses, paleontologists believe the toe claw may have had other roles as well. Smaller raptors may have used it for climbing trees to escape danger or even chase some prey, much like modern predators such as big cats and bears. Others suggest the claw might have aided in gripping uneven terrain, giving these dinosaurs more versatility than previously thought, but its primary use was almost certainly a deadly one, and no fossil captures the deadly purpose of this claw better than one crazy discovery. A velociraptor locked in combat with its prey, known as the fighting dinosaurs. This famous fossil was found in the Gobi Desert of Mongolia and dates back roughly 75 million years. It vividly showcases a velociraptor and a protoceratops in their final, brutal moments, an ancient fight frozen in stone. In this fossilized snapshot, it seems that the ambitious velociraptor initiated the attack, its left hand gripping the protoceratops's skull, while the lethal sickle-shaped toe claw was positioned near the protoceratops's neck and abdomen. Two areas packed with vital organs, not good news for the herbivore. However, the velociraptor wasn't doing too great either. The herbivore fought back, locking its powerful beak onto the velociraptor's arm. Scientists think it may have even slammed the velociraptor into the ground, pinning it beneath its own weight, a last-ditch counterattack that turned the tables. How exactly they died remains debated. Initially, scientists thought the pair had been buried alive by a collapsing sand dune during their fight. closer inspection of the Protoceratops' skeleton though showed even more brutal injuries, a broken shoulder and a torn off limb, suggesting the dinosaurs may have fatally wounded each other before scavengers partially disturbed their bodies and the sand buried them for good. Regardless of how exactly they died, this fossil is one of the clearest pieces of evidence we have that the infamous toe claw was more than just for show. It was a specialized killing tool, one that raptors did not hesitate to use in battle. But why exactly did Velociraptor and its relatives evolve such a uniquely vicious weapon in the first place? Life as a predator in the late Cretaceous wasn't easy. Hunting wasn't just difficult, it was dangerous. Prey were often bigger, stronger, and sometimes even armored. Predators weren't just competing with prey, they were competing with each other. For raptors, who were built light and lean, brute force wasn't really an option, so they adapted. Instead of going head to head with the giants, they carved out a different niche, focusing on speed, agility, and precision. The sickle-shaped toe claw wasn't just designed to deliver the killing blow, it was a multi-purpose tool. Paleontologists believe raptors had a similar hunting strategy to modern birds of prey, like hawks or eagles, gripping and pinning their prey with their feet, locking it down so their hands and teeth could finish the job. In some cases, they may have even started eating while the prey was still alive. This is brutal but effective. What makes this claw even worse for its prey was that it helped the Velociraptor to even climb trees and scale cliffs, giving it an edge that most other raptors didn't have, and making life even harder for some animals that thought they were safe. This is where things get interesting. We have spoken on the Velociraptor a lot, but it wasn't the only raptor with a massive toe claw. Other members of its family evolved their own versions, some larger, some deadlier, and each uniquely adapted to dominate their own prehistoric environments. Velociraptor was dangerous, sure, but it was only about the size of a turkey. Some larger raptors took the deadly potential of this claw to an entirely new level. Starting with the largest and potentially most deadly raptor ever discovered, a predator whose massive claw was truly the stuff of nightmares. The Utah raptor. Discovered in the Cedar Mountain Formation of Utah, it lived around 126 million years ago during the early Cretaceous, long before its famous Mongolian cousin, Velociraptor. But what makes Utah raptors stand out most is the sheer, terrifying size of its sickle claw. While Velociraptor's killing claw measured around 2.5 inches, that's 6.5 centimeters, roughly the size of a human finger, Utah raptor took things to a whole new level. Its sickle claw reached an astonishing 9 to 10 inches, that's 23 to 25 centimeters long. It was bigger and stronger in almost every single way to Velociraptor. Standing nearly 6 feet tall, that's 1.8 meters at the hips, and stretching up to 20 feet, that's 6 meters long. But Utah raptor wasn't just the biggest raptor, it was built for a different kind of fight. Where Velociraptor was slender and agile, Utah raptor was stocky and heavily muscled, designed to bring down some serious prey. With its massive sickle claw, it likely didn't waste time grappling like its smaller cousins. Instead, it may have gone straight for the kill, delivering powerful kicks and deep slashes meant to end the fight fast. We're talking about a predator that could take on ornithopods, plant eaters that weighed several times more than it did, and win. Interestingly, despite its enormous size, Utah raptor retained a certain agility thanks to its specialized anatomy. Its strong legs and flexible reinforced tail allowed it to balance during dynamic combat. Some paleontologists even believe Utah raptor may have hunted in packs. That means that if one wasn't scary enough, you could have been facing several. And if that was true, then for any herbivore on the menu, the odds of survival were basically zero. Its claw was the peak of raptor evolution, the ultimate combination of size, strength, and lethality. Utah raptor stood at the top, but even it wasn't the only one pushing the limits on how these predators hunted. Another raptor, slightly smaller but just as legendary, took things in a different direction. And it's this dinosaur that gave paleontologists some of the most important insights into how these claws worked and how these creatures actually lived. Its name was Deinonychus. Deinonychus might not have been as colossal as Utah raptor, nor as famous as Velociraptor, but is arguably the most important raptor ever discovered. When paleontologists uncovered this predator in the 1960s, it transformed our understanding of dinosaurs forever. It lived about 110 million years ago in North America and was roughly the size of a large wolf. Its iconic sickle-shaped claw measured around 5 inches, that's 13 centimeters in length, shorter than Utahraptor's monstrous blade, but noticeably bigger than Velociraptor's. What made Deinonychus groundbreaking wasn't just its claw though, it was how it reshaped how scientists understood dinosaur behavior. Before its discovery, dinosaurs were often depicted as slow, lumbering reptiles. Deinonychus challenged that outdated view completely. Its anatomy screamed agility, speed, and intelligence. Lightweight bones, powerful hind legs, and long arms suggested a highly active lifestyle full of dynamic pursuits and strategic hunting. One famous site, the Clovelly Formation in Montana, revealed compelling evidence of Deinonychus behavior. Here, paleontologists found the remains of multiple Deinonychus individuals alongside the bones of the much larger herbivore Tenontosaurus. This discovery strongly hinted that Deinonychus did not hunt alone. It hunted in coordinated packs. Imagine multiple agile predators attacking simultaneously, each raptor darting in with surgical strikes with their sickle claws, aiming for vital areas to quickly overwhelm the larger prey. It's a hunting style reminiscent of wolves today, smart, cooperative, and brutally effective. Biomechanical studies of Deinonychus's claws reinforce this theory. Its structure wasn't built merely to slash wildly at prey. Instead, it functioned like an eagle's talon, puncturing deeply and holding victims tightly in place, pinning them down so prey could not escape, while the raptor delivered precise bites and slashes to finish it off. In fact, some scientists suggest Deinonychus might have used its feet to literally stand on top of its prey, restraining it firmly while feeding, a chilling image that underscores just how efficient this dinosaur was at killing. The importance of Deinonychus extends beyond its hunting technique though. This dinosaur fundamentally altered our view of dinosaur evolution itself. It revealed striking similarities between raptors and birds, laying the groundwork for now widely accepted ideas that birds are living dinosaurs, direct descendants of predators like Deinonychus. Everything from its lightweight bones and flexible wrists to its specialized sickle claw helped scientists draw clear evolutionary lines, connecting these ancient hunters to modern birds. So while Velociraptor had finesse and Utahraptor brought raw power, Deinonychus provided the crucial scientific breakthroughs. This all points to how Raptor's deadly claw was more than just a weapon. It was part of a larger evolutionary toolkit, combining agility, intelligence, and cooperative strategy to dominate prehistoric ecosystems. These 3 raptor species might be the best known raptors, but the Dromaeosaur family was much bigger and more diverse. Many other species carried that signature sickle claw, each evolving their own spin on the design. Take Bamphiraptor for example, smaller and lighter, possibly an agile climber, with a claw that might have helped it scamper up trees or catch small prey with precision. Then there's Microraptor, famous for its 4 wings and gliding ability, likely using its claws not just for killing but for gripping branches in the forest canopy. Even Megaraptor, while not a true Dromaeosaur, shows how claw evolution took surprising turns. Megaraptor's massive hand claws may have done more damage than any toe claw, showing that claws in all shapes and sizes were a deadly toolkit for different predators. Each of these raptors tailored their claws and hunting styles to their unique environments and prey. From tree-scaling hunters to ground-based ambushers, the Dromaeosaurs were masters of adaptation, proving that one of evolution's most famous weapons came in terrifying forms. Despite all we know about raptors and their fearsome sickle-shaped toe claws, the full story of these deadly weapons is far from complete. Fossil evidence directly showing the devastating power of these claws is surprisingly rare. Beyond the famous fighting dinosaurs fossil, which is our clearest proof that these claws were lethal weapons, there's little hard evidence revealing the full extent of the damage these claws could inflict. The Dromaeosaurs ruled for tens of millions of years, adapting their hunting strategies and claw shapes to suit different ecosystems and prey. But like many dinosaur lineages, their reign ended abruptly around 66 million years ago when a massive asteroid impact reshaped life on Earth forever.